Welcome to Liberty.me Studio. Be part of the global Liberty community at Liberty.me. Liberty lives here.
Hey everybody, this is Tatiana Moroz and welcome to the Tatiana Show. I'm here with my friend Chris Ellis, who's joining us from the UK tonight. Hi Chris, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Cool. So I'm really excited to have you on the show today. We're going to be talking about a few different things that are, exciting to me, of course, Bitcoin, and then the use of Bitcoin to tip artists with your new platform, I guess. What would you call it? Protocol? Platform?
Well, I'm calling it a project for now, but yes, I would like it to become an established protocol.
Okay, cool. So why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself and how you got into Bitcoin?
Sure. Yeah. So I discovered Bitcoin a few years ago, and a friend of mine that I'm now having the pleasure of working with first introduced it to me. And at the time, I had a lot going on in my life, so I wasn't able to dedicate that much attention to it. But then, sort of early 2013, late 2012, early 2013, things started happening to the price, and I started to take notice of it again. And eventually, I read the Bitcoin white paper. And when that happened, everything changed in my life. Like my diet changed. I wasn't eating. I wasn't sleeping. I was just finding myself besotted and bewitched by this thing called Bitcoin. My background, actually, as a kid, when I was growing up, I learnt to code. I was very lucky. I had a dad who was a programmer, and he was able to teach me a lot about computer science. So even though I ended up going into like an artsy kind of field, when I grew up, it's sort of Bitcoin kind of rekindled that kind of love that I had as a kid growing up into cryptography, and I started to see what was actually possible with this technology.
Mm-hmm. And how long have you been involved with Bitcoin?
So since about 2013, early 2013.
Wow. Okay, cool. So what about the people that are, one of the things I thought would be exciting, because you said that this was a topic that you're really passionate about, was I was thinking that some of the people tuning into this precast are not people that are already familiar with Bitcoin, or perhaps they're viewers from Liberty.me and they are familiar with it, but maybe they have some questions. So before we launch into ProTip, I thought that maybe you could give us a brief overview of what is Bitcoin, and then we could do a little Q&A in a safe place.
No, I think that'd be great. Look, talking about Bitcoin and helping people understand Bitcoin better is one of my favorite things to do. So it's really not a problem at all. So at its most fundamental level, Bitcoin is a digital currency that you can use on the internet, much like you have been using your dollars or your pounds or your euros for some time. Currencies across the world have been digitized now over the course of about 20 to 30 years. And it's really something that's just started to take our attention away. There are certain upsides to having digital currencies. For example, you don't have to have the inconvenience of going to the ATM to get your cash machine, so there's a convenience factor. But the other reason why we've been digitizing currencies is because we get information about spending habits. One of the things you'll have noticed, particularly over the last 5 to 10 years, is the increase in loyalty points. So when you go shopping at the grocery store or whatever, they'll offer you discount voucher cards or some kind of card that you present when you go through to your purchase. And the reason they're doing that is because the information about your money is almost as important, if not more valuable in the long run, than the money itself. So over time, it became necessary for technical as well as, I would say, political reasons for there to be a newer kind of currency, one that wasn't controlled by a central bank or a government or any kind of private institution, one that was rather run by the people. And that's what Bitcoin represents. So Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer network. It's very similar to Napster, except it's slightly more evolved. It's actually closer to something like BitTorrent, which many of your viewers may also have heard of. It's actually run by people like you and me. The barriers to entry now are a lot higher than they were at the beginning, but actually you can buy something called a Bitcoin miner. It's a piece of computer equipment. You can attach it to the Bitcoin network, point the miner at the network. And when it joins, you are basically on an equal footing with every other node on the network. It's not a hierarchy. It's quite a flat kind of structure.
What's a node?
And as one of these, a node is, a node is just a computer on a network.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a computer on a network. And so as one of these miners, you basically get the same privileges that everybody else does. What you're going to be doing is you're actually going to be processing payments on the network. So you're going to be witnessing other people's spending. So someone's going to say, look, Alice wants to send a Bitcoin to Bob. And she's going to make that claim. And you have to, as a miner, you have to say, okay, I've heard about this transaction on the network. And then at the same time as doing that, you're going to be performing a really, really difficult mathematical puzzle, not by hand, not manually, but your computer will be doing that. And
Can I?
it'll take, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, because when you talk about a mathematical puzzle, I know that that must be what they refer to when they talk about cryptography, but like, why does there need to be a puzzle in the first place? And like, who's making the puzzle? Where is that? Like, what is the mathematical? Is it a mathematical formula that was created specific to Bitcoin? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, sure. So there's a very good reason why you have to do it. And that's because we want to make sure that people are not lying about the spending, because otherwise people could just make up all the different spending habits they're doing. They could essentially pay for things twice. They could say, right, I paid this person and then I pay this person. So we want some effort to be, these miners have to put some effort in when they witness these transactions so that we can prove that they are honest about what they did. Otherwise, they've just wasted all that energy. And at the same time, lots of other miners are also going to be witnessing the same transactions. So it's not as if they can easily get away with it. And so what the mathematical puzzle that they're solving is actually just a meaningless, they're actually just brute in the technical jargon. I don't want to use too much technical jargon, but they're basically just trying to get a particular number to begin with a certain amount of zeros at the beginning, which is very, very difficult mathematically. Like, you have to keep guessing at the number. You know roughly what the number should be, but you have to have a certain number of leading zeros at the beginning. That's what it looks like. And what will happen is that you'll keep trying this, and you will be in a race with other miners on the network. So you're all racing, and you're all witnessing the transactions, and you're performing this. And this is going to cost you energy. And it's also going to cost you time, because you have to maintain the machine. But when you're successful, every now and again you'll be successful, and your transactions will win. And the ones that you've witnessed, you'll get the mathematical puzzle right. You'll submit it to the network along with all the transactions that you've witnessed on the network. And if you're successful, if you got the sum right, the network will reward you with new Bitcoins. So at the moment, the reward is 25 Bitcoins if you get it right. And so this provides an incentive. It provides a business opportunity for budding entrepreneurs out there that have a little bit of technical knowledge to go out and buy one of these miners, and then they can go off and provide this service. So let's look at it higher level. I don't want to get too technical for your audience unless they want me to. So
I have a question though.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is it like, okay, if I have a miner, right? Does my miner have the same chance of winning as others, except that it's like a lotto ticket? I have one lotto ticket, whereas somebody who has 10 lotto tickets, aka 10 miners, is more likely to win because they have 10 lotto tickets. But we still have the equal footing, or is there other advantages to the other computers because maybe one computer is better than the other? Like, how does that work? Because if each
Very
thing is
much.
a node.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of differences between the different mining equipment, and you'll often hear the term when you get into it called hashing power. And so some computers are faster than others, and that's what's created this kind of arms race that we've seen over the last sort of 12 months or so, with lots of companies coming out saying that they can deliver these miners at certain performance, and some of those companies have not delivered on that just because the competition is so fierce and because it's easy to make promises. So they absolutely do differ. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, continue. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I also feel like
No.
I like getting the little chunks, and I feel like maybe other people are the same way. So, all right, we got to understand
No,
kind of
please
why
do.
the miners are there
Yeah, please
and how they
do
kind of
come
work.
in, especially if I
Okay.
get too technical. Okay.
Okay, I'm
So
gonna try and keep it real simple.
the fundamental difference is that it's not immediately obvious to people that are new to Bitcoin as to why they should care that this is a peer-to-peer network rather than something that depends on a central bank or institution. And one of the most popular reasons to cite amongst the Bitcoin adopters is to say that, well, the central bank just controls the money supply, but Bitcoin isn't controlled by the central bank. So there's an old trope in finance that you should never play a game unless you know you can cheat ahead of time. And this has been one of the hallmarks actually of the financial industry of the last 10 years. And one of the features of finance is that they want to be able to change the rules on a whim, but they have more privilege to do so than you or I. We can't change how much money is in supply. They can just go off and quantitative easing, it's often called, or they can just print new money. But printing new money basically has the effect of making the people that get the money first rich at the expense of the people that get the money later. Because if I print off some new banknotes and I give them to you first, you get a beneficial advantage over everybody else in the economy because you get the new money. And so it just rains inflation on everybody else. And a lot of people see this as interventionist, and a lot of people see this as actually theft, quite a cowardly form of theft, actually, because you're basically stealing wealth from people. And this makes it difficult for us to price our labor. It makes it difficult for us to price our time. And so Bitcoin is as well a political statement. One of the principal differences is then that everyone plays by the same rules. And this is 180 degrees different to the way the traditional banking system has worked. So it has this kind of peer-to-peer element. There's another element to it, though, which is privacy, financial privacy. At the moment, when you set up yourself as a money transmitter or a bank or any kind of financial service, you become deputized by the government. The government will employ you to monitor the activities of your customers for them. And when you trigger, as a customer, when you trigger certain alarm bells, that company has a duty to report you to the authorities. One of the ways this will present itself to you is that when you need to set up a bank account, they will ask you to give a driver's license and a passport and a proof of address, which is therefore very, very detrimental to people that are homeless or people that have moved to a new country for the first time and are having difficulty because they end up in a double bind. They can't get a job without a bank account, but they can't get the bank account without the job and the residency and all of these other things. And so you have to bootstrap yourself. Well, with Bitcoin, you don't have to have a passport to establish an account on the network. In fact, your computer will issue you with an account number. You don't get any sort codes of Bitcoin. You basically get a big long string of numbers and letters. And that essentially is delivered to you by the universe itself. It's actually the randomness in the universe that your computer issues to you. So it actually has a profound impact on people, particularly down in the lower socioeconomic scales, not just in the developed world, but also in the developing world, because mobile phones now outnumber human beings on the planet. Everyone is, well, not everyone quite, but 3 billion people currently today, that's more people than were alive in 1960, currently have internet access, and that number is growing. And so what this does is it provides the potential for financial services to billions of people who otherwise have been shut out. And remember, the previous point was that now everyone gets to play by the same rules because the software runs on everyone's computer. There isn't a central server because we have these miners that are entrepreneurs that are taking, they're taking a business opportunity and processing the payments. So look, it's a lot to take in. We build this as an entry level introduction to Bitcoin. I'm doing the best that I can, but I think it's fair to say that Bitcoin does command of you some degree of attention. Like it isn't going to be, I think one of the reasons we got into the financial mess that we did back in 2008 and 2000 before it was because we were outsourcing our financial obligations to other people without really scrutinizing or keeping any kind of checks and balances in place. So this is going to be, a good lesson for us, really.
Do you think that people in the past, throughout the history of banking, have been looking for something with these types of qualities?
Oh, no. I mean, this is the opposite of what they want. Like I do
No,
meet a
I'm
lot of
saying
people
like
in.
people that are aware, for example, Austrian economists, right? They're pretty aware that
Oh,
central
sure.
banking is not a good idea.
Yeah.
My friend Bob Murphy, who is on the show, he's actually one of the first Austrians that really kind of came out in support of Bitcoin. So do you think, I mean, I know that there's a lot of aspects of it that are really revolutionary and really crazy, but do you think that people would have pictured that something with this functionality was important?
Well, let's see. I mean, Bitcoin has some really interesting properties that I think make it unique as a commodity. I don't think we've ever seen anything quite like this because there's a lot we can say about it. So let me go into one or two of its other properties. One of its properties is that it's deflationary and arguably the first ever deflationary currency that we've ever had. Gold bugs will argue differently, but the problem with gold is that you could always find some more gold. Bitcoin, on the other hand, has a hard limit in the amount of Bitcoins that can ever exist. That's currently set at 21 million. And they are released in these kind of, 10-minute, statistically 10-minute cycles with the miners that are rewarded with new Bitcoins for publishing and witnessing transactions that they see on the network. So there's that aspect. And I certainly think from that point of view, yes, this is something that a lot of people, particularly from the Austrian School of Economics, would have anticipated with, some gleeful anticipation, no doubt. They would have wanted this. However, Bitcoin also has some other properties too that I don't think were easy for us to have anticipated ahead of time. And one is the fact that with the account number, I said that your computer basically gives you your account number. Well, it turns out that all of the transactions are public. Now, there's a good reason why they need to be public. And let's just be clear on this. You yourself as a legal entity are not public on the blockchain unless you choose to be. But you are given a string of random numbers and letters that are very difficult to remember. You'd have to copy and paste it on a computer or scan it in from a barcode. Those are public. So it's only your legal identity that gets revealed when you associate yourself with that address. So if I see that you've got that address, or if you post it up on your Twitter profile or your Facebook or something, then everyone will know it's you. Now you have this thing called a blockchain. And a blockchain is just basically the public ledger for Bitcoin. And there are several websites like blockchain.info or blockexplorer.com where you can go and you can look up people's account balances in Bitcoin. You can look at all the live transactions as they're coming in. There's an important reason why the founder, Satoshi Nakamoto, decided to do that. And that is phrased very early on in the white paper. In fact, if you go ahead and search for the Bitcoin white paper, if you're interested at this stage, I highly recommend you go ahead and read that as one of the first things that you do. It's very easy to read. It'll take you about 25, 30 minutes. Yeah, it's very easy to read. It's not academic, really. I mean, yeah, there's a little bit of maths in it towards the end, but you don't need to know that. You don't need to understand that to grasp the concept itself. So at the end of the abstract in the first page, he says that, look, nodes, as in computers owned by people, they can join and leave the network at will, that the messages, the transactions, are broadcast on a best effort basis so that we can rely on what happened whilst we were looking the other way. And that's the key statement there. I'm paraphrasing from doing it from memory. We need to know what happens when we go to sleep at night. We need to know that we can go to sleep, that we can entrust this ledger with all of these monetary transactions on them to some other group of people, and for them not to kind of fiddle the books whilst we're sleeping or whilst we're looking the other way, because we all have discretionary attention. We all have a finite amount of time, and we can't be watching our money all of the time. And so it was necessary, Satoshi believed, for you to have this public ledger that, even though it was divorced from your legal identity, unlike things like Facebook, for example, or Google Plus that mandate you use your real name, but it would use instead this random string of numbers and letters. And then it's up to you voluntarily to decide whether or not you want to associate yourself with that public address. But the benefit, of course, with it being public is that it has many eyes on it at all times. That in fact, not only eyes on it, but it's also a copy of the ledger is distributed all across the world. It's very difficult. If you want to tamper with it, You would not only have to perform all the electricity that would be required to do all the mining yourself, you would also have to get into the computers of all the people that have backups of the ledger, and you'd have to go and replace those with your copy if you wanted to give yourself lots of money, or if you wanted to print new money. Let's say, I don't know, you wanted to go to war, you needed to finance this in some way. You wouldn't be able to do that on a whim. In other words, you would have to earn that right. You wouldn't just be able to print the money.
Okay. I felt like I had a question, but okay. So I'm kind of wondering, so, people sometimes are really worried that Bitcoin can be used for terrorism and scary things, but it seems like, and also you think, well, if all of these transactions are public, I don't really care for that because I want privacy, right? But I guess I can opt out, or one can opt out. It seems like the obvious benefit to society would be that, um, embezzlements don't occur, or, siphoning of money illegally, that kind of thing. Do you think that it is a willful misunderstanding by governments, or do you think that they are also not that thrilled about having certain aspects of their activities on the blockchain? You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like little people's actions are, I don't know, because it's like you're still sort of traceable, right? So if I wanted to smuggle out $1 billion out of the country, when they sent all those funds to, for example, Iraq, right? And they had all this money missing. They're like, I don't know what happened. Sorry. And that was the end. So Bitcoin would potentially be able to at least raise the alarm, like, hey guys, there's all this money missing. What's going on? So that's potentially a very good thing. It makes me wonder why those entities are not necessarily seeing that, or is that, I mean, it very well could be, a nefarious reason for it, but I mean, do you think that people really genuinely don't understand that benefit to society, like the people that are legit, I guess?
So there's a few things wrapped up in it. So first of all, we should dispel the myth that Bitcoin is anonymous. It's not anonymous. So a lot of people have said it can be used for buying drugs, it can be used for money laundering. Well, it wouldn't be much use as a currency if it couldn't be used for buying drugs. So yes, of course, it's possible for you to be able to buy drugs with it. You can buy a lot of drugs with dollars too and other currencies. So it passes that test. In terms of the money laundering, it's very difficult to do money laundering with Bitcoin. You have to have a lot of technical knowledge for a start. Bitcoin as a market is very, very small. I haven't looked at the latest figures, but it's much less than 10 billion. So if you were going to do a money laundering at any kind of scale in terms of organized crime or the way that governments do it, you would need a much, much bigger market with more liquidity, because otherwise, as soon as you try to launder it, you're just going to move the market too much, and not only, possibly exposing yourself, but also probably costing you a lot of money too. Now, so that being said, some other points that you raised, I feel like you're trying to sort of get into this mindset of like, well, you tell me, are you saying that it wouldn't be possible to send money to Iraq because it would be witnessable on the blockchain? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that, let's say Bitcoin went really big and it became something, and it's like, further progeny, it gets more and more advanced. I would think that that public ledger would be a really good watchdog for
Right.
bad spending.
Yeah.
I mean, if you say that, like, this, and I think it's something, unfortunately, that's really rampant with government. There's all sorts of weird side deals going on. Look at what
Mm.
happened with the Silk Road. Oh, Ross is so bad. Meanwhile, they stole over $800,000, and they found that out because they used Bitcoin, and because it was obvious to trace what they did, because the guy didn't choose to make himself, like, not like, he didn't attach it to some sort of a sneaky fake persona. He attached it to, like, his personal bank account in a way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So there's a lot that can be said here. So one of the great things that happened recently in Bitcoin, or well, I say great with hesitation, we had something called MTGOX, which was an exchange that crashed last year. I say it's great because, unlike in the banking sector, this was a bad business that was allowed to fail. It was insolvent. It was an Bitcoin exchange where you could buy and sell Bitcoins for dollars. And the person that was operating it was either completely negligent or something else was afoot. We don't know quite. There's been allegations, but the point is that they were insolvent. The people that had the money on the exchanges lost their money, but the whole business collapsed. He wasn't able to kind of prop it up. Now, what happened next was fascinating from a social point of view. What you had was citizen policing. You had people in their own times going off and looking at the blockchain and scrutinizing it and actually doing their own detective work. I mean, look at what happens when we have public inquiries, right? When governments say, well, you know, this bad thing has happened, we'll have to have a public inquiry. And then 3 years later, everyone forgets about it. And then suddenly, you know, some newspaper will write about it and everyone will remember, oh yeah, the Hutton inquiry. Remember the sexed up dossier, the weapons of mass destruction. And then we all go to sleep again because 24-hour news cycle, right? And so there's always some news that's going to overtake that important thing. Time moves on. People have discretionary attention, as I said. Governments know this, politicians know this, and they use it to their advantage. What was interesting about Bitcoin is because everyone now had the same tools as the police have, is they started doing the police, and it was in their interest to start investigating this stuff. So you're right, it's absolutely possible that if you start sending money to Iraq or you start, you know, some money gets sent over to ISIS, that there could be some concerned individuals, also journalists too, who might be scrutinizing and watching for that kind of money flow and asking questions. And really what that does is it takes policing back to its roots. It actually makes police work, detective work again, which is not what it's become. And what it's become is a bunch of people sitting in rooms looking at TV screens and monitoring people. That's not police work. That's tyranny. You know, Plato's definition of a tyrant was someone that wanted to see without being seen. And that's exactly what we have right now with organizations like the NSA. And it's really just lazy and sloppy, and I find it quite tyrannical. So we're talking about an open source peer-to-peer network with Bitcoin that everyone has to play by the same rules, and everyone has access to the same information. And that's a fantastic leveler. And yeah, absolutely, I agree. Potentially, it could be used to spot that. I would like to quote, if I may, Julian Assange, who says that we should have anonymity for the weak, accountability for the strong. And so what this doesn't mean is this doesn't mean you're going to have many eyes on every single actor on the network, because that would be untenable. Of course, we need privacy. Without privacy, we don't have the time and the freedom to discover who we are. In many ways, privacy is the permission that society gives you to discover who you are. So if you're small, then I don't think it's going to matter. But if you're big and you're moving large sums of money, if you're a public figure, I think it's going to be harder for you to launder your money because you're going to have more people watching you. And I think hopefully, my personal hope, if I can be political myself on the show, is that no one will want to be a politician in 5 to 10 years. It will be the job you do if you are just good at it, but not because you want the power. You know what I mean? Like you're the sort of person that embraces that level of responsibility. You're not just doing it because you've got a career or a dynasty to uphold.
Well, because the thing is that, like, if you're a small person and you do something, they already have a dossier on everybody, right? So that they could find it out and they can kind of bully you into whatever they think is the right thing to do. But if you've got a bunch of small people doing the police work, then that means that there's a lot of people's, probably most likely their dollars at stake, right? I mean, they have some sort of vested interest to be pissed about this happening in the first place. So the greater interest of the people will be served through that scrutiny. Because you could almost, like, there was a little question mark while you were explaining that in my mind about, well, if there's police work of the people watching, then why is that worse than, Big Brother watching? But the interests of the people are more, I mean, it almost seems like a little like a democracy play, but that's not really quite what it is either. It's just the interests of the people are probably more likely to be good versus some guy in charge with guns that's kind of enforcing whatever they want to happen. Just in general, as far as like what government is, it's like a bunch of people that decide for everybody else what they should and should not do. And generally, if they have that much power, they're not going to be
Yeah,
good
that's right.
guys,
And
you know.
remember,
And sometimes you do get good rulers, I think, but generally that doesn't happen. It's not like what history is
right,
known
and
for.
it's also pot luck as well, and as to which ruler you're going to get. Remember where democracy came from, or governing generally. Government was a response to the mob, and it was largely invented by, well, okay, democracy was invented by the Greeks. Government wasn't invented by the Greeks, but Cleisthenes came up with democracy as a settlement system. It was like, look, I can't, you know, he's trying to take his city back from the Spartans, and he couldn't simply become an aristocrat again because the people who had grown used to a certain, what, demos kratos, they had people power in the traditional sense of the word democracy, but he had to invent a voting system. And the reason he had to invent a voting system is because they had descended into mob rule, and it was the only condition on which they would agree to back down and become peaceful again was if he could give them some way of saying, we agree to disagree when some condition is met. So everyone got to vote, or a certain number of people. If you climbed the Hill of Sticks, if you were a man, you could go up there and you could vote. And so this democracy, of course, is very different to the one we have now. We have representative democracy. We have mostly just two-party systems. We have a 2.5-party system here in the UK. You're basically going to get the same thing either way. And essentially, democracy doesn't scale. Why? Because if you're one of 10 people in a voting mechanism, well, you've got 10% of the vote. But every time you add a new person, your influence gets diluted, you see, with each new member. And the other reason why democracy just isn't really working at the moment, I think, is because information just travels so quickly across space and time that people feel like, hey, why don't you just give me the tools that I need to act on this information right now? And look, if you look back historically at what governments have done, governments don't innovate. They basically exist to maintain the status quo. And generally politicians, I find, go for that job because they want to keep an eye on their interests. They're there to look after things, to make sure that things don't change. And what they'll do is they'll look for paradigm shifts. They'll watch the innovators, the entrepreneurs, the creatives, the people with courage and conviction, and they'll watch that shift. And then they'll learn to become parasitical on the new paradigm that then gets instituted. The problem is that these arbitrary borders that the governments really try to mandate are, you know, subject to constant renegotiation and constant enforcement. And the planet still has that sway over us in those little gaps between it. And I'm really just trying to help. It's not, you know, for me to sort of, you know, overthrow government. I'm really here. I really want my project to be like, how do I help individuals like become more autonomous, more independent for themselves, and just give them that kind of personal freedom, rather than trying to make it all about kind of, you know, down with government kind of thing. Do you see what I mean? And I think that's what Satoshi was doing with the white paper as well. He was just trying to give people the tools they needed, absent the government doing it, you know, for them.
Chris, you're cutting out a little bit. I don't know if to the audience I'm cutting out or if you're cutting out, but that's got a little bit tricky toward the end. But I think I see what you're saying because, you know, one of the reasons why I went into Bitcoin was because I felt that the political system was pretty basically not effective in order to bring about goodness in the world, right? I always thought about how to make the world a better place. What kind of system of organization would work that would be the most equitable and the most, you know, fruitful for mankind. And I think that Bitcoin does that. Do you think that discussing some of this more political stuff is like I personally really enjoy that about Bitcoin, but do you think that that's something that average people find boring, or do you think that they find it threatening, like, or do you think that they find it enlightening? Like, I like to think that they find it enlightening and inspiring and it gets them thinking. And it also, like, when I would say, oh, I'm a libertarian or something, people would be turned off because if they weren't a libertarian, if they weren't, you know, if they were a Republican or Democrat or whatever, there would be some sort of a blockade. So talking about politics was a little bit weird. But I think that maybe the way that you're talking about it, you're talking about the importance of the individual, and it's not really, and about society, so it's not really wrapped up in some sort of a label. But it is somewhat, you know, disruptive talk, to put it lightly. Do you think that that's positive? Do you think that that's a pressure point that we need to push on in our society right now to help people realize that? or do you think it's a
I
drawback?
think, yeah, first of all, am I coming across okay now? Can you hear me okay?
Just as you started speaking, it was a little bit bad, but we can give it a shot.
Okay. Well,
I'll make
let
hand
me
signals
have a
if
go
it's
at
bad.
answering the question and see how it goes.
Sure.
Um, yeah, so I think that in some ways the Bitcoin community kind of scares people from the outside a little bit. That's one of the things that I've noticed. I think when we talk about like the banking system and we talk about, especially if you use words like libertarianism, it means so many different things to different people. And I think that that can have a tendency to put people off. And I think one of the thing is nobody wants to be told that their money might be worthless,
Chris.
in a few years. Nobody wants to have to think about like, well, what do I have to do now? What market do I want to go into? It's this is one of the biggest problems that Bitcoin has at the moment, which is that it's far too inward facing, that it just kind of looks at itself. It knows why it's important, but other people don't seem to be getting it. Okay.
Chris.
Shall I try reconnecting?
Yeah, I would try reconnecting and I'll just yeah, 'cause I mean I'm really interested in what you have to say. Do you have any kind of other programs on or anything? You have to have everything like Skype, anything that's on your Wi-Fi turned off, 'cause Spreecast eats up a lot of bandwidth it looks like. Mark is funny. Sorry guys about the technical difficulties, but oh, Chris, you're back?
Hello, am I back?
You are back.
Great, great, great. Sorry about
No, I think that this
that.
might be a little bit better.
Okay, good, good. Yeah, so I
Okay.
think it does scare people. I think people that are outside of Bitcoin that aren't into it do get a little bit intimidated by some of the language and the rhetoric, and certainly like the word libertarian means so many different things. Like it means something different in the UK than it does in the US. And also Bitcoin isn't necessarily libertarian. It's effectively just a piece of software and it's pretty neutral. And people are going to bring to it whatever they want to bring to it. Is quite narcissistic in that way, the tale of Narcissus. He's looking at his reflection, he's obsessed with his reflection, but of course the key thing is he doesn't know it's him. And this is one of the things I always try to point out with Bitcoin and technology is that we are essentially just staring at ourselves and we bring so much of our own values to it. And this is, I think, something that we need to be a little bit more conscious of going into the future, especially when Bitcoiners start to talk to people that aren't into it. And like a number of people, like when I go up to them and they like, no, I've heard the pitch. I've heard the pitch. You don't have to give me the pitch, because they're totally aware of this problem. They have a general awareness, but there isn't the understanding and the education. Everyone's at very different levels technically. And I feel like, there's been a sort of a high priesthood of engineers who've kind of taken us into this technological future. We get different habits to adopt every year, pretty much. We're sharing more than we've ever done before. We're taking pictures of things. We're checking into places. We're doing all of these things, largely because of a technological revolution, without really educating people as to why or how or what happens to that data once it's collected, who owns it, who profits from it.
Okay. So do you think, that, all right, so let's move on to pro tip a little bit because I think that, one of the things that kind of pops out to me is potentially using artists and other kinds of people to tell the story of Bitcoin. And whether that is through something like me, where I have a direct story with Bitcoin and oh, it influenced me like this, or if it's as simple as some artist being like, hey, I just got some Bitcoin the other day, weird. Or some artist that got a bunch of Bitcoins and was like not into it before, but is now excited. Um, and having different storytellers. Of course, I think of storytellers as musicians, but there's others. Why did you build ProTip and how do you think that that can fit into the ecosystem?
Because I
And what
needed
is
it
it?
myself. I need it myself. Like I run a YouTube channel. I've been doing it for like 18 months, and my co-hosts Thomas Hunt and Theo Goodman, and Jamie and everyone, we were putting Bitcoin addresses in the description of the pages, and guess what? People donated, even though they didn't have to. There was nothing like forcing them to do it. We just said, hey, you like our shows? Please donate here. That can help us keep on doing it. What we found was that people did want to help out if they were given the opportunity and it was easy enough to do. But we weren't making enough. We couldn't raise enough money to not have to go and then go off and get jobs. So I recognized that as an artist myself, I've been a lifelong artist. I used to be a photographer. I used to be a musician. I've done all of these things. Artists really have the power to say things that most other people in any other profession just can't say. That I think artists often, I like to say that artists remember the forgotten. They like to remind us of the things that civilization often forgets, that particularly when it's important. And if you think about, back to the Italian Renaissance and all these, artists that really have the ability to inspire people into action, you can't put a price on that. And it's certainly something that we're going to miss if it goes. Not necessarily something we feel a sense of urgency to protect now. So look, I've been into lots of different things. I've been into like quantified self for some time. I've been measuring, self-tracking. I'm also into Bitcoin. I'm also an artist. So I just kind of pulled it all together and I came up with this idea. It was like, okay, what if we could help people monitor their time on the internet, collate like their top 10 favorite websites each week, and then have it like automatically tip those artists, right? If it finds a Bitcoin address on the page, it will just say, hey, do you want me to tip these people? And it can basically take all of the things that advertisers do already. So if you go to The Economist or you go to one of these magazines, they're running scripts in the background. You can run something called Ghostery, as you would expect, Ghostery. Okay, Ghostery, download that and it will show you all the little scripts that they're running, that they're monitoring you. They're putting cookies on your computer, they're taking your IP address, they'll take your email if you give it to them. They'll then start to set up marketplaces where they'll sell this data to each other and they'll buy it off of you. For example, right now in the UK, a mobile phone number is worth about £7. Okay, so when you go to a website and you put your phone number in, you're giving them a tradable asset that they can go off and do. So I said, look, why don't we just give people that same technology, but give it to them, put it in the browser, make it a browser extension, and let them have that tool, and don't necessarily like give it to all the websites. And then as they start browsing the web, the app will find Bitcoin addresses for you automatically on the page. It will monitor the amount of time that you're spending, and at the end of the week, it will give you your top 10 favorite websites, and it will ask you, like, do you want me to pay all these people? And you only have to top it up with as much money as you feel comfortable with. So if you only want to spend like $4 a week tipping your favorite artists, that's all you have to do. And the next thing I wanted to do is I wanted to give the artists, because I felt like that's not enough, I want to give the artists like a call to action. I want artists to be able to turn around to their audience members and say, subscribe, using this app or using this protocol, subscribe here. So we ended up coming up with a subscribe feature, which was you go through your top 10 websites that week and you say, I really, really like Mad Bitcoins. I really, really like Tatiana. I want to actually subscribe to her for some amount of time. And so you can just click the favorite button and then you get put onto a subscription page. And we wanted people, the ability for you to then talk to your audience. So you could then send them messages and maybe like, give them bonus features or something like that. And then the next level we wanted to do was the paywalls. Actually, we call them content passes because we don't like to think of paywalls. So that gives you the ability as an artist to say, right, most of my work is free and anyone can access it any time, but maybe I can do like a backstage video and I can like put that on a private link. Well, at the moment, if you want to have a paywall on your website, it's quite expensive to do. You have to get like a PayPal account, you have to install some software, you usually have to like hire some developer to help you get set up with a web store, and it also requires ongoing maintenance. But we just wanted to make that really super easy and peer-to-peer and open source. And it's open source for two reasons. One is because we need it to be transparent. We want everyone to be able to see the code, but also because what if we're not the right persons to deliver this? Like, what if another group of developers with more capability than us want to come along and build on this? What if, my developer and I need to go off and get jobs because it's not working out in the short term? So we just wanted to make a tool that we felt was keeping in the spirit of the original philosophy of Bitcoin, in that it's peer-to-peer and distributed, but that could also help artists raise money for their work without having to become full-time business people and, setting up, all of these kind of merchant, systems with PayPal and so
on. Let me ask you a question. So would there be, all right, so I have Tatiana coin, right? I started that. It's like very challenging in some ways, because now that it exists, actually letting people use the coins is not invented, basically. There's vend.io. They made me a vending machine where people can send money from a counter wallet and they buy Bitcoin. They buy Tatiana coin and it goes back to their counter wallet. First of all, they have to have Bitcoins and they have to send them to the counter wallet, and now they send them to my site. So way better than when we first launched it. Um, but now, like, what I'd really like to do is, I raised money for my album, but there's still a little bit more that I need to spend money on, and more importantly, I need to market. And every time I call up, and try and find out how much a PR service is, it's anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000 a month. And I'm like, I'm not gonna have an extra 2 or 4 grand a month anytime soon, plus having, my other things going on. Like, that's not very realistic. What I'd love to see happen though is to give Tatiana Coin more utility, a way to distribute those coins to people. Is there some sort of a thought about like reward points? We started this conversation with loyalty programs, right? Is there a way to use ProTip to kind of make that donation go both ways? They give you a donation and you give them something that they can later on use in a different way. I mean, I know I'm the only
So
artist coin. I'm not saying like make something for me specifically, but I think that there could be some sort of a benefit to kind of thinking through whether or not that would be like, because if I'm just donating to somebody once a week, I might want some little stupid coupons to use. You know what I'm saying? Because that's what the artist coins are, right? They're going to get you like little treats. Or I mean larger prizes, but you're basically saving them up and stuff like that. So offering a reward into the pro tip, I don't think that would be that difficult either, right? I don't know. Because if
yeah,
they've
I
already got an
can't, I can't.
account,
Yeah. So yeah, I can't do the technical spec off the top of my head, obviously, but it doesn't sound impossible to do. I know that Let's Talk Bitcoin are working on something that is similar to this. So in
yeah.
theory, yes, you could build something into the messaging system by all means. We were very keen early on. One of the wish lists we had was a reward mechanism, so that if you were performing as a donator, if you were donating like above the network average, that you would be subject to reward points. So that is something that we had been thinking about very early on. I'm a little bit personally, having been, one of the co-founders of Feathercoin, one of the first sort of altcoins around, I am actually, in spite of that, still a little bit skeptical about the landscape of all the coins, because I think that the sudden insurge of all of these cryptocurrencies has caused a massive kind of depression in the markets, because everyone just feels like, well, there's a huge forking problem. We're not able to discern the good quality assets from the bad quality assets. And as a result, a lot of these pretty much all of these altcoins have gone down in price quite heavily. There's also liquidity issues with them, because they're only worth as much as someone else is willing to buy it for. And if you don't have the liquidity in the market, again, people are rewarded with these loyalty points, but then if the price crashes, they've just kind of lost that value. So yes, in principle, absolutely. The actual app is currency agnostic. We're using Bitcoin because we have to, because we couldn't use fiat. We would have to be regulated with a bank. It would have cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars. Another benefit to Bitcoin, you see, even as developers, we can hack this together with $10,000 very cheaply. So you're getting this kind of innovation. But yes, I can certainly see that you would want to issue some kind of reward token. I think rudimentarily, you would probably just be able to do it through the messaging system initially. And then if you were able to tie it to the Bitcoin keys eventually, I think that could also be a solution too.
Yeah, Adam and I have been talking about it. He was kind enough to spend about an hour and a half trying to go over some of these challenges that we've been having. Um, but I think that the tipping function would be really interesting. So would that be just built into any kind of website, right? What
Yeah,
do you
so
guys need in order to make that happen? Like how much time is going to go on before people can start using it? And maybe we could have you back a different time once it's ready and we could do a little demo. I think that
yeah,
would be interesting.
yeah, that'd be great. Well, the app is currently in development. We've got alpha testers that have been using it for a few months. There's a demo version that's available on our website or on the Indiegogo, so I'll post up the link to in one moment. And so essentially this is important. You don't have to be a coder to be able to start using this. The problem with a lot of these other tipping services is that you either have to outsource the management of the funds to a central party, or you have to install some plugin on your website, which usually involves installing an app or copying and pasting some code into your website, or going into like the HTML header. And a lot of people find that quite scary and intimidating. And anyway, they don't see the benefit because they don't think that other people will use it, because it's locked in. You're locked into using this one company. So the advantage we thought of using just copying and pasting a Bitcoin address on your web page is, first of all, everyone knows how to copy and paste. So if you want to be tipped for this video, for example, you just copy and paste your Bitcoin address into the description of this video, and our app will find it. And that if we wrote this code and we open sourced it, other people could fork it, other people could take that same code, repeat it, and we could create a culture of reward by just making it as easy as possible for people to give. Take away all excuses and give the artists an ability to reach out to people and say, connect with me. You know, could this have been a connection? How much money are you leaving on the table right now with your website? How many people would be happy to pay for your songs on SoundCloud or for your blog posts, your really thoughtful blog posts, but you just don't give them the opportunity to? But what if you did give them the opportunity? What if it was that easy?
Well, then, but aren't you only limiting yourself to a bunch of Bitcoiners who just lost a whole bunch of money in the past year, like compared to what they had in the beginning? Like, I feel like the Bitcoin market is a little bit depressed. You know, everybody kind of spent like, I mean, I know I spent like, you know, well, I didn't go that crazy, but you know what I'm saying? Like, everybody thought that at the end of this year it was going to be worth $10,000. Like, yeah, we can go party every night. I mean, there was like some sort of a vibe with everybody, like a bunch of like rich kids or something that just got like a pile of money, or rather poor kids that got a pile of money, right? Because it's like a bunch of activists. So I feel like, you know, the tipping culture has gone, and then maybe that's just my perception, but it seems like people don't have that as much money to donate. And then you're only saying that basically people that already own Bitcoin can be donating, and that's a very small portion of people who are watching content worldwide. So is this an opportunity to introduce new people to Bitcoin, or do you think that that's going to be a challenge?
So we don't really have a choice at the moment. Yes, I agree that the Bitcoin market is very small, but it also creates an opportunity, because I think this could be really good for Bitcoin too, because it could help spread awareness of Bitcoin. It could also help artists that were maybe thinking of getting into Bitcoin who needed an excuse to, but were, you know, worrying about it. One of the biggest obstacles to Bitcoin, you know, is buying them. And I think it would be a great way to get into Bitcoin is to earn them. Right? It will not take you longer than 60 seconds. We've timed it for you to set up a Bitcoin address and for you to copy and paste it in your YouTube descriptions, put it into your Twitter profile, put it into your, you know, SoundCloud, put it into your DeviantArt, wherever it is that you like to express yourself. Just put a Bitcoin address, just copy and paste it, and it will be pro tip ready. And what we will actually do is we will showcase your work. We're going to set up a new website in the coming months. We had one, we took it down. We're going to put up a better one. And we're going to start showcasing people's work on there. And actually, like I say, try to encourage this culture of reward. I think one of the ways we can make money disappear is by making everything cost money. I think we have to, certainly on the internet, we have to get over this notion that things are free. Nothing is free unless it costs you your freedom. If you're not paying for it, you are the product. That's the old saying. And it's something that I think came along, you know, largely because of companies like Yahoo and Google and Facebook now famously, who offer this stuff for free. But really, it's not free. You're paying with your freedom. They're really spending it in terms of marketing. But what it means is that smaller players in the market can't compete, because you can't compete with free. So I think it's going to become necessary for people to trade and do commerce on the internet. I think the downside to you putting a Bitcoin on your address is minimal. It takes about a minute of your time. And I think that we will try to focus on a core area of the community. It could be musicians like you, or it could be writers. We don't know yet. We're thinking possibly YouTubers right now, particularly those guys are feeling the pinch with the ad revenues going down lately. And we want to give them like, okay, let's just focus on the community that finds this the most valuable, and let's see what they bring to this. You know, rather than me like prescribing and saying this is how it's going to work, I'd rather like reach out to the community on the 1st of May when we launch officially. I want people to come to me and say this is how it should be done, and I'll take everything on board, and hopefully we can like get a good community going on the GitHub and actually have people, contributing to the project, because I don't want it to just be about us. I like, yeah, we can lay the tools out and we can get things started, but if other people want to bring energy to this and they believe in the vision, I want to see them take part too.
You're cutting out it just a little bit at the very end, but I think that whole concept of open source in general is so foreign and yet really interesting to people. I don't think that people necessarily even think about how open source can be good. Um, I don't know. I think that there's a lot of really interesting points that you raised here. So I would like to have you back on another time, and maybe what we could do is we could also show people how to buy Bitcoin, how to do a wallet, and we could do these little in 3 minutes, 3 minutes, 3 minutes, 3 minutes, like little chunkers. And then later on, I'll go back and I can edit these videos and make them little short snippets for people. I would love to do something like that. So May 1st, you're going to be launching, right? What do people need to do in order to be a part of that? And then they can also donate to your project, which is over there on the side. It's on Indiegogo. If you Google Indiegogo Pro Tip, you'll find it. And what's
Yeah.
your Twitter handle? Mr. Chris
Also,
Ellis, and then Pro Tip
yeah.
HQ, right?
Yeah, at ProTip HQ is on Twitter, and you can also go protip.is, and that will also take you to the Indiegogo as well. And we think, I'm almost ready to announce that we've reached our goal, actually. We had a very, very generous donation last night of $1,000 from Anthony Goodman. Thank you, Anthony, if you're watching this. And I can also confirm that we have now got into escrow 9.5 Bitcoins from a very successful auction that we ran last week for a rare Casacious silver Bitcoin. So we have 9.5, but like I say, touch wood, because that's got to go through the escrow process. But once that goes through, that should leave the final figure at something like 11,500. We only need absolutely bare minimum 10,000 in order to get to the 1st of May launch. So it looks like we've achieved that, but we'd love to do a lot more, because some of the features that we talked about, like the messaging and the paywalls, we need more money in order to do that, because we have to survive in the meantime. But we are starving artists. Leo, my friend, and I, we are living, I'm couch surfing right now. I'm in a friend's place and I'm not paying London rent prices. So I'm living really, really lean. And we think that all great things have to come with sacrifices. It's just the nature of it. I think a lot of people have been wanting to build a tool like this for a very long time, but it takes courage and it takes sacrifice and commitment. But we're up for it. We believe in it. And so I really want to see people getting involved. And even if you can't give any money, you can still share it, show it to a friend. If you've got any struggling artists or ambitious musicians who want to get a foothold, send them our way. Like, show us this thing, tell them to get involved, give us your feedback. Maybe you're a software engineer. So yeah, that's been absolutely
I have
fabulous.
a really good idea for this.
Been great
We're
to talk to
we're
you.
gonna talk afterward. I'm gonna give you
Yeah,
I have
go
a
ahead.
secret plan which I want to share with people. I was thinking about what you said before about how the altcoins kind of depress the market, and in my mind I'm like, well, I'm not an altcoin and I didn't pump and dump, and you had also spoken about that. And I think that part of the frustration in the Bitcoin
Right.
space is that there's these kind of shady characters that weaseled money out of everybody and did all this sketchy stuff.
Yeah.
And you know, like even though I raised about, I don't know, I think like 9,000 or something with Tatiana Coin, like I made basically a professional like $100,000 album for like 1/10 of the price. Here you are with an idea, you and your friend are living like, animals on people's couches, like eating ramen noodles. And this is, in my opinion, what people should be kind of donating to and being a part of, not necessarily the next get rich quick scheme. And you need a
Right.
lot of different varieties of types of projects, but it stinks when kind of the shadier projects get the promotion because they've gamed the system.
Mhm.
People were never going to make money off of Tatiana Coin. They were just going to help me so I can make music, and because they liked what I did.
Yeah.
And I have an incentive to do a good job. And like with you guys, you're not taking a fancy trip somewhere and like writing off, crazy dinners at some place or whatever, like some of these other companies are doing. And I commend you for that. I think that's really cool. It seems like you guys have like a spirit of the people attitude that can be faked, but I think is very genuine in this case, and I really appreciate that. So I made a donation direct the other day.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Well, trust has to be earned, and so does the legitimacy, and we expect people to be to scrutinize us and test us and push us as well. So
Yeah,
don't take my word for it. Please do try me.
yeah. No, I think that that's really cool. I guess we're gonna finish up the show right now. There were a couple questions. Oh my God, there's a whole bunch of questions. Grant Brown asks, where did you get that beautiful accent? New Jersey, okay? I don't know why he might think it might be you. No, I'm just kidding. Chris, where are you from?
I'm from London in
Okay, good.
England.
I want to go there at some point,
Yeah.
maybe in September or something. I gotta talk to my girlfriend about that. What about Bitcoin's value? When the hash rate is halved next year, does it basically double?
No, I don't think it automatically does. And is it
Yeah,
next year? What year is
2016.
it now?
That's when it's supposed to happen.
Oh yeah, gosh, that came around quickly, didn't it? Um, yeah, I think there's two arguments. One is that nobody knows about this, or not enough people know about it, and therefore it hasn't been priced into the market. And therefore, when it happens, everyone will like anticipate it. That in itself could create a narcissistic rally. That is, that people now are all telling themselves this story about how it's going to go up, so it will go up. But I don't think it should in theory, because that's all laid out in the protocol at day one. So we all knew this was going to happen. It should already be priced in, but that's not always the practice.
Um,
So you might be right.
okay, here's another good question. Um, what is your best word? Oh wait, look, I could go put on air. Now I'm learning like some tricks at this place. What is your best and worst case scenario for the future of Bitcoin?
Oh gosh. Well, the worst case scenario is on the verge of happening right now, where people get apathetic and the price drops and people don't trust it anymore and all this kind of thing. So right now, I'm really anxious and concerned. I'm concerned, and that's one of the reasons why we decided to do ProTip as opposed to any of the other ideas that we had, because we thought it probably would do the most good for Bitcoin in terms of spreading awareness and helping people get set up with a wallet for the first time, especially if you use it in conjunction with ChangeTip, which is another form of tipping, which we wanted to differentiate ourselves from slightly, because they actually help it so that anyone can send you bitcoins and you don't have to set up a Bitcoin address; they already give you one. Whereas we wanted it to be more context driven, where I've just watched this piece of artwork and I want to tip you incidentally. So we thought that those two in tandem will both be beneficial to Bitcoin. And the best case scenario for Bitcoin, I think, is that people understand it and they embrace it and they want to be in charge of their own financial freedom and independence. And even if it's not Bitcoin that goes off to become the global, reserve currency, that at least the blockchain technology itself will, and that I'm sure Bitcoin will be up there as one of a range of commodities and currencies that will compete, as I think, in my opinion, currencies
Yeah,
should.
I mean, it'll be really interesting to see, when more people start thinking about it, what ideas are going to burst forward. With right now, that's what's fun about Bitcoin. It's like you go in every day thinking about this big thing happening and everybody's throwing out ideas and they're all like flowering. It's really, really interesting. So if you get more people in the garden, there's going to be like a whole bunch more flowers and foliage. Um,
Yeah, I think you're right.
oh, here's a depressing question. What happens when people begin taxing Bitcoin users? Will the system be based off of honesty? I don't understand that second part, but maybe you do. People, well, who would be the people taxing Bitcoin users? I guess the government. And then that's not based off
Well,
of
the
honesty
biggest
because,
threat, yeah, the biggest threat with taxation with Bitcoin is that these companies like Circle or Bitstamp or whatever, because they are deputized by the authorities, that there's a danger that they might start sending back all your Bitcoin trading habits to the IRS or to HMRC here in the UK, and that poses a potential threat, I think, to people's personal freedom and liberty, when these companies start spying on their customers and then reporting back. Yeah, I think it is a problem. Voluntary taxation is a problem. It's probably way too big a topic for
Yeah,
us to
we'll
go
have to go
into
into that next
towards the
time.
end of a show, but it's certainly something yeah, I'd love to go into it another time though,
Yeah,
for
I
sure.
really thought that this was a really good show. I would love to have you back on. We'll have to do it soon. I wish you great success with your project. One more time for people, where can they go and find out more?
They can go to protip.is, that will forward you to the Indiegogo campaign. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Mr. Chris Ellis, and ProTip is at ProTipHQ.
Okay, so everybody, that was Pro Tip HQ and then Mr. Chris Ellis. Thanks very much for having, or no, thanks not for having me on your show. For you being on my show, you are a wonderful guest. Thank you everybody for tuning in. This was really, really fun, and thanks very much. I'll see you all later. Peace out. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Liberty.me Studio. The views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of Liberty.me. Join the global Liberty community today at Liberty.me. Liberty lives here.